Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason, you left out a co-host.
I was going to say that. In, I think, the first time in 190 episodes, we have a third person in the podcast booth today. Who is the third person?
Yeah, this is Isla Strasser. This is my 4-month-old daughter, holding her as we record this. Obviously, no one else sees the webcam, but we're obviously looking at each other when we record these. And I've got my daughter on my lap tonight for the first time since we've started doing this podcast and since she's been born.
Yeah, cool. No, it's good. We're recording this on Thursday evening, so we just saw each other at the Wild match last night.
Yeah, it was good to get back out to a Wild game. That was only my second one of the season, so it was good to see you as well as some of the other regulars we see at the Wild games like Sandra Persina. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about that game as well as a few other topics tonight.
Mm-hmm. And if you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
So as the name implies, we talk all about soccer in Calgary at the amateur, post-secondary, and professional levels. We talk a lot about the two professional teams in the city, those being the Calgary Wild and Cavalry FC, but we don't shy away from amateur soccer. And at this time of year, we talk a lot about the Calgary-based teams in the Alberta Premier League.
In this episode, our topics will include reviewing the Wild's match against the Ottawa Rapid from Wednesday evening. We're going to preview the Cavalry FC match versus Vancouver FC on Friday evening. We're going to talk about some Alberta Premier League reviews of matches, previews of matches, title clinching scenarios. And we do have an interview this week. Scott, who's our interview with?
Yeah, once again, Jason, I wasn't able to join you, but earlier this week you spoke with Kennedi Kiarash, who is the Calgary Wild's U23 team head coach. That's the team that competes in the Alberta Premier League. But Kennedi is also the academy director for the Wild and has been an assistant coach for the professional team.
Yeah, and she's also been the head coach of the U18 team as well. I didn't include that in the notes. So she's had many roles with the club. And we got a chance to talk about all that. We'll run that interview in our Alberta Premier League segment in a little bit. But let's get started and talk about the Calgary Wild senior side.
Hi, this is Carly Johnson, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So as mentioned, the Wild were playing a home game on Wednesday night at McMahon Stadium, a rare midweek game. Not too unexpected, Jason. The result was another loss, this being the 5th consecutive defeat for the Wild, keeping them basement of the Northern Super League standings. But overall, there were some glimpses of progress, right? And this was, I believe, the second game for new head coach Leah Blayney. And, I think it was actually a pretty close game. I think even though the Wild lost, I thought they did manage to go toe-to-toe with league leaders Ottawa for a good portion of the match.
Yeah, final score was 2-1. After watching some of these the Wild matches, I thought this one, it did seem a lot more interesting. It seemed like they were in the game. They played with some spirit. Yeah, I just think in general, it was still a loss, but this was a match where, you could see things that you liked and were positive. You know what I mean? And
what caught my attention this time was the way the Wild responded to going 1-0 down. So the first goal took about 36 minutes, but Ottawa did break the deadlock through a goal from Kira Mellenhorst, who capitalized after an errant pass out the back from Sonia O'Neill. Even though it was 1-0 at halftime, the Wild rebounded quite well from that goal. They didn't droop their shoulders like we've seen in previous games when they went down a goal. And early into the second half, they actually equalized with a really well-taken header from Callie Johnson.
Yeah, Callie Johnson back from injury. I think her second match back. Really nice cross in from Maya Jones. I think it was excellent cross. And they tied it up. We were getting near the end and a point was seeming possible.
Yeah, it really did. And unfortunately, Ottawa broke Wild fans' hearts with the go-ahead goal in the 72nd minute. A near post drive from Joanne Friedland. Near post, Caitlin Talbert kind of let this one go through her mitts. A well-taken strike, but one that, if Talbert just manages to make that save, this would have been a 1-1 game. And honestly, Jason, she had a fairly decent game, some good saves, especially in the first half. But this was another error from Caitlin Talbert that unfortunately was kind of a big factor in the ultimate results, the final scoreline.
As far as the perceptions from new head coach Leah Blayney, we were at the post-match press conference. I think, again, a very recurrent theme in her every time she's been doing media is talking about, patience and just this is going to take time. I believe she used the term incremental improvements was what she's looking for right now.
Yeah, which if you read between the lines is essentially saying, like, don't expect a miracle. She's only just arrived and she's definitely not come in and saying, I'm going to turn things around immediately. So don't expect a string of wins right off the bat, basically. And yeah, we have, especially with this game, I think we did see a little bit of positivity for the first time in a while. And Collie Johnson talked about that new manager bounce in terms of team morale. But yeah, overall, I mean, incremental improvements, great. But at this point, halfway through the season now, pretty much, and still without a win. So what does that mean? Could the Wild go a whole season without a win? I think that would be pretty disastrous.
I didn't see an attendance number from this game, but I realize it's a midweek game, but I think it's just safe to say that attendance isn't growing right now this second year.
No, it's probably a lot less than it was last year when the team was doing a bit better and challenging for a playoff position. So I think there's always going to be people who are going to support this team no matter what. And I do think there was probably a couple thousand people at the beginning of the game, but as has been the case with other Wild games, I think some people left before the final whistle.
Mm-hmm. There were some roster changes, but before we even go into the roster changes, I wanted to bring up a topic that we discussed yesterday at the match. What do you think, Scott? Do you think maybe it's time to make a change at the goalkeeper position? Sarah Kelty-Dilling has been with the club since day one. She's never appeared in a match. Do you think it's time to give her a try?
At this point, I don't see why not. She's been very active in terms of like the community outreach that the club has done. And she has played for the Alberta Premier League team, the U23s. But yeah, you're right. She's never seen the field in an NSL game. And obviously she has been third choice throughout the team's brief history. But this season, we've seen the two other goalkeepers ahead of her get minutes. Caitlin Talbert has, been the starting keeper, but Molly Race did play a couple of games at the start of the season. So, I mean, neither of those really inspired confidence. So yeah, why not give Sarah Kelty-Dilling a chance at this point? What's there to lose?
I think we've been a bit critical of some of Caitlin Talbert's goals that she's let in. I think that her resume has been good. She's had definitely some good moments, but I think at this point, like just changing things up and stuff, like Sarah Kelty-Dilling is a local player. She's the oldest player on the roster. She's got lots of experience, not a lot of pro experience, but a lot of experience. And if you're going to have somebody on your roster using a roster spot, like why not just give it a go and see what happens? She should get a chance. And if they don't have confidence to put her in at this point, like when are they going to have confidence to put her in?
Exactly.
Now that we've talked about that change, which would be like within the roster change, let's talk about some of the changes. We had one departure and one arrival this week.
Yes, the departure is Catherine Harvey, the forward/winger, has left the club shortly after Michelle Romero. So that's two departures in the last week or so. Catherine Harvey's departure didn't come as too much of a shock when considering how little she's played this season. She was one of the acquisitions midway through the season last year. She joined and I think had a promising start, but overall, like for a forward player, just hasn't produced the number of goals or assists that you'd expect.
Yeah, she was brought in when they brought in Jorian Balcom, which I think was right on the same time, about 1 year from now, and I think in the July transfer window, and she scored one goal. Forwards are supposed to score goals, and this is a team that has had an absolute inability to score goals. Catherine Harvey, in the last 6 matches, she has spent 4 of them on the bench, and 2 of them she's come in as a sub prior to her leaving. So if you're a forward and you're not really able to make it on the pitch on this team that can't score, the coaches have lost confidence.
So yeah, 2 recent departures and 1 recent addition, Jason. On Wednesday, we saw the debut of Hannah Boughton, an American who was signed with the Wild, or I guess I could say American/Canadian. as she does have dual citizenship, or maybe even triple citizenship, as I think we're going to talk about. But yeah, her first game, she slotted in at the center of midfield alongside Jackie Sawicki. And, I think played quite conservatively, definitely didn't want to make mistakes, but showed a few flashes of competence. And what did you make of Hannah Botten?
Head coach Leah Blayney said that she had one training session with the team and they threw her out there in the starting lineup. Not trying to make a mistake was probably a pretty reasonable goal. And we got to remember here too, like this was her first match as a pro. She just graduated from the University of Central Florida. She's a young player. So it's not like they brought in a veteran player who's played pro for 4, 5, 6 years and they bring them into town and the next day they put them in the starting 11.
Yeah, straight into the deep end, hey? But sink or swim, I guess. But yeah, in terms of her style of play, she definitely seems to be a box-to-box midfielder. She covered a lot of ground, as mentioned, was kind of playing as a defensive midfield pivot next to Jackie Sawicki. Feel like she favored the left, but did roam quite a bit in the middle of the park. Seems like she could be a replacement for Janaea Robertson, who just found out is injured potentially for a while.
She doesn't count against the import quota of 8. She counts as a Canadian. So
as mentioned, qualifies as a Canadian player per the NSL rules. And not the only addition to the Wild that we heard of this week, Jason, although the other one is a new member of the coaching staff.
Corey Babington. He is Australian and has a long relationship with new head coach Leah Blayney.
He was the assistant coach when Blayney was head coach of the Australia U20s, and last year was head coach of the Central Coast Mariners women's team in the Women's A-League. However, that club was purchased. Good detail in our notes here from you, Jason, by the company that is also the majority owner of Queen's Park Rangers and the minority owner of LAFC.
Central Coast Mariners, they have a team in the Men's A-League and the Women's A-League. This organization bought the men's team and did not buy the women's team, didn't have any interest in running the women's team. So they informed the staff that you're no longer required here. And I believe that there has been some effort to try and figure out a way for somebody else to take over the women's part. But at this point, since the team is in limbo, it made Corey Babington a free agent and available to join Leah Blayney here in Canada.
Hi, I'm Eric Kobza. Welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So speaking of Cavalry FC, now let's pivot to talk about the men's professional team. They have a match against Vancouver FC this Friday evening with a late kickoff. Calgary time, it would be 8 p.m. if you want to watch it on One Soccer. So missing Gote Natigny due to accumulation of yellow cards, which is unfortunate, Jason, because he has had a couple of really strong performances on the wing as of late. And probably missing Michael Baldissimo as well with a likely injury. It's probably going to be a tough game. Hey, Vancouver FC is probably in the best form of their history, and they've climbed the table up to 4th place.
Have they ever been as high as 4th before? I don't know. I guess probably be something we could research and figure out, but I sort of doubt it.
I know one season I remember they were chasing a playoff spot, but I believe it was like the 5th and last playoff spot. So yeah, top 4 for Vancouver FC. It's almost uncharted territory. But I think we talked in our last episode that they've had a couple of really promising wins and results since coming off the World Cup break, and they've been scoring buckets of goals, right? So they're currently on 17 points after 13 matches, which puts them only 1 point back of 3rd place Atletico Ottawa.
It's a little different thinking about Vancouver as being a hot, high-scoring team like this. But that being said, Cavalry has had trouble beating this team over the last while.
Yeah, while they did beat Vancouver FC 2-0 earlier this season, that game was also out in Langley back in May. Overall, I mean, if you look back the last couple of years, there have been a ton of draws between these two teams. According to the preview on CanPL.ca, 6 of the last 8 games between Cavalry and Vancouver FC have ended in draws. And one of the other games, which was a win for Cavalry, was just that was the 5-4. That crazy game where Dan Klomp scored in the 97th minute in his first game back after returning from Europe. If he hadn't scored that would have been a draw as well. So these teams, for whatever reason, even though Cavalry often finishes way up the table compared to Vancouver FC does seem to really show up on the day whenever they play the Cavs.
I know you already raised this point, Scott, when we were talking about this, but seems like we have more to talk about Vancouver FC than Cavalry. I guess that just shows you that really there's not a lot of drama, not a lot of real obvious things to talk about right now with Cavalry. They just seem to be humming along nicely and not as many talking points as opposed to a team that has been, mostly dreadful and is now playing pretty well.
Yeah, it's been a really strong start to the season for Cavalry. They're still in second place behind Forge, who are having an even stronger season. But to that point, Cavalry are coming off, 3 games without a win. If you think about the fact that, they lost to Vancouver Whitecaps and then drew them. And then their last game, they dropped 2 points at home in a game against Halifax, allowing Halifax to equalize fairly late into it. So Cavalry are coming into this probably, looking to reverse that. I wouldn't call it a slump because, you have to play the Whitecaps twice. It's not very easy to do. But considering, dropping points at home to Wanderers, they're going to come into this with a point to prove, I think.
Yeah, and Tommy Wilden Jr. is back from the World Cup final, and he'll be back in the dugout again on Friday evening.
And as he said before the World Cup, he said he's hoping to come back a better coach. So he has done this coaching course throughout the World Cup, and we'll see if we notice anything different about his coaching tack.
This is Kennedi Kiarash, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Okay, let's talk about the Alberta Premier League. There were a couple matches on Tuesday, so maybe we'll start there. Rangers was hosting a doubleheader at Weber Athletic Park. They played Wild U23 and they played Cavalry 2, and they were very accommodating hosts for both matches.
Which is to say that Rangers did not have a good evening. On the women's side, this was an easy one for Wild U23. The table toppers beat Rangers 6-1 thanks to a hat trick from Annalise Chikoria and a brace from Ojong Tabo, and then Shaden Al-Assad rounding out the goals total. Rangers' lone goal came from Sienna de Guzman.
Cavalry 2 defeated Rangers 3-1. Cavs' 2 goals were from Thomas Stuber, Beckham Lawyer Beswick, and Lucas Correa. Rangers' lone goal was from Alex Kemsley, who also plays for MRU.
Yeah, I recognize that name. And I also recognize some of the names of the first team players who were suiting up for Cavalry 2, including Joe Holiday, who started at goalkeeper, James McGlinchey, who played a full 90, and Curtis Ofori, who started and played 73 minutes.
Why don't we talk about the tables, and let's talk about the table on the women's side. First, Wild U23 with that win, they have 28 points, and they are posed to win the APL title.
Yeah, they have a 4-point lead over Blizzard, who are in second place with 2 games to go. So it is likely that the Wild U23 will finish first, depending on how they do in their last couple of matches. And then in third place, just 1 point back of Blizzard, is Foothills on 23 points. So all the Wild U23s need is a win.
If they win their match on Friday, it doesn't matter what anyone else does. They're good to go. They'll have 31 points and nobody can catch them. A pretty remarkable year for Wild U23. Remember last year when the Wild team had a very poor start and then their season was deemed to be an exhibition season, but this year they've really come on and put together a really solid program.
Yeah, and they've had some members of the senior team have played down quite a few times, which I'm sure helps. I wish I could have been out to a match to kind of see them play in person because they really put together a strong run of performances in 2026.
This is a perfect time to insert an interview with Kennedi Kiarash. She is the architect of all of this. She is the technical director of the academy. She is the head coach of this U23 team. So she pretty much put this together. Like, this is her project. So I had a chance to catch up with her yesterday, and we talked about all of this stuff. And let's just run it now. I'd like to welcome Kennedi Kiarash to the podcast. She is the technical director of the Calgary Wild Academy. She is the head coach of the U23 and U18 teams, and she is an assistant coach for the senior side. Kennedi, welcome to our podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Could you give us a bit of a background about your career? Like, I know you're not a native Calgarian, so why don't you just tell us sort of about your background in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most soccer coaches, grew up playing from a young age, went and played in the US for my university career. When I came home, just League One in Ontario, and I ended up injuring myself, which naturally led me into coaching. So at that time, I was already working, it was as a volunteer at NDC Ontario. I was working at York University and primarily coaching out of North Mississauga. I was also working for a supplemental company, Final Third. So I was wearing about 4 different hats at that time. But I think that just propelled me forward in coaching because I was learning under some pretty great names, I think, in Ontario. Yeah, I think once I got injured, just coaching naturally started to happen. And I was at NDC Ontario, was hosting the NDC teams, and I met one of the staff actually who ended up working for the Halifax Tides. And while I was there for my B license, I got asked to have a meeting with the owner there, and naturally, again, just weirdly enough, happened to get involved as the second assistant coach and video analyst for the Halifax Tides last year. And when we were playing against Calgary in one of our games, one of the staff just kind of mentioned that there was a job opportunity here to work with the academy and help grow that, and then also be a part of the first team. And I love working in youth soccer. So for me, it was a easy decision to be able to kind of grow the youth side here at the next level. And then also continue to kind of grow myself in that youth game where, I kind of had ownership of a team and could help develop that, and then continue to learn from another group of top coaches within the first team. So I think it's been a pretty easy transition to come here, but that's, I guess, in a little nutshell of how I ended up here.
You're familiar, last year, the Wild had a program that was in, I guess at the time, called League One Alberta. There was kind of a exhibition season there. The games didn't count in the standings. But this year, there's been a real change, obviously, like been part of the regular APL structure and top of the table right now. So you want to talk about how the program has changed from last year to this year, and on what steps have you kind of taken to build it up like this?
Yeah, so when I came in January is when I started my contract and moved to Calgary. When I came in, I think they were hoping for more of a part-time program, both U23 and U18. And I actually think they more so just wanted a U23 part-time program to be able to have that feeder system that goes directly into our first team. So we would be able to have some supporter players there. And we already had a few players that they had identified to be a part of like our youth permit contracts for the first team. I was more wanting a full-time program to make sure that we could properly support the first team, I think was a big, thought for me. So what I wanted was a U23 team full-time. So we would be on the field 5-6 days a week, and then having them in a competitive league. I found out that obviously Wild had been a part of it, like you were saying, in a more of an exhibition series last year. And I wanted us to be able to compete this year, to be able to drive that competitive edge within the program. So in February, I hosted trials to field both a U18 and a U23 team. So our U18 is part-time, U23 full-time. And those were invitational trials that we hosted. And from there, I selected both groups with the help from some local clubs and from some of our first team staff that came out. And from there, we built, I would say, a fairly young, I think I only had 2, and then a third came in like university level players, but that's because they're players that our first team wants to track, in addition to our young ones that we also want to keep tabs on and to contribute to our first team. So a lot of I think we've had 5 youth permits called up to our first team, which means our U23 team is kind of serving its purpose and giving those players that next level to work into. And I think 4 of them have stepped on the field for our first team. Yeah, Shad and Tora, Clara, and OJ all step in for our first team and actually get on the field. We've had a couple others be on the bench and be ready for us to call on them when needed. And then, our U18 team, although part-time, I think we're building good relationships with the local clubs where we're able to call those U18s in as trialists for when we need them for games. And I think last night, at least, and I know we had Rangers players playing against Rangers, which was funky, but we had a couple 2011s on the field. I think our oldest was a 2009 last night on the field. So we've had a fairly young group field for us for most of the League One season.
Yeah, like I was going to ask you about last night's match. We're recording this on Wednesday morning, 6-1 victory. That starting roster that you had, there were 5 2009s and 3 2010s in the lineup. And yeah, you had a couple 2011s, 2010, 2009 on the bench. Like that's really a young team. And that's kind of, I guess, ultimately what you're going for here. And also, I guess it's probably also partly a function of those university players have already left pretty much.
Yeah, so we only had 2 that were currently in university that went back to West Virginia. But again, those are players that we want to be tracking within our first team. So Naima and Anna came in and supported us in both fronts of U23 and first team, but they're too old to serve as youth permits. So they would come in as training players, and they did that consistently for our first team. The rest of the group, I mean, I think we've had 6 2008s go off to university. And the rest have been either 2009, 2010, or 2011 that have fielded for us so far.
One name that I saw in the starting lineup yesterday, Izzy Monk on the U23 squad. Well, she's graduated player.
Yeah.
What can you talk about her presence on the team right now?
Yeah, I think Izzy's been a fantastic role model for our girls to have in the environment consistently. She's also a player who does step in and help our first team when needed. So she's there within our first team environment quite a few times a week. And I think she's able to bring a lot of leadership, obviously technical and tactical quality to our team. Her sister Clara as well. Both of them together on the field, it was fantastic for our young ones to see and to have in the environment. And she's definitely looking to progress her soccer career. And I think she has the tools to be able to do that. I think she will find a fantastic contract. And while she's here, it's just giving her a good opportunity to be able to get big game minutes for us and be able to train in a first team environment. So I think she's been a great addition to our environment this year. And we're trying to help her best way we can to either compete or to develop to be able to move on to that next contract.
I guess I want to maybe just circle back. You mentioned about Naima and Anna. We've had both of them on the podcast as guests, so I've got a bit of familiarity with them, and they typically haven't played a lot of League One APL. So what was sort of the enticement to bring them in? Like, because they played a lot of matches actually. Because I think in previous years, maybe they played a game or two or something like that, but you had them play pretty consistently throughout this season.
Yeah, I think it's that opportunity to be training with the first team as well. I think for us, again, they were 2 players that they knew a lot of our players actually. So that was great because I think they also wanted to be leaders there. And we joke about it when they were still here, but the first practice they came out to, I don't think it was the best showing from our young group. So I think they had a couple of questions of maybe this might not be the right environment, but our young ones definitely picked it up and it became quite competitive after that practice. But I do remember them showing up and I wasn't sure if we'd be able to provide the environment they needed. We definitely did. I think they really enjoyed their time with us and being, again, leaders on the field. And I think for us, like both leaders, like very like physically on the field, showing their skill and what they're capable of doing, but also just kind of taking on those mentorship roles to be able to teach the young girls. But I think that they were great when they stepped into our first team environment. They helped maintain the standard that was needed and at some points drive it a little bit. So I think for us to have them in the first team environment, it was great development for them to see what a professional team does on a regular basis, to help them improve, and to also just help maintain that standard within the first team environment as well.
So we are getting near the end of the APL season, and Wild U23 is at the top of the table, poised to claim the title, right? Like you need 3 points in the final 2 matches, and you're definitely in a very good position here. So I'm presuming you're quite happy about it. You want to talk in general about how you felt it's gone and have your goals been met?
Yeah, I think obviously not being from Calgary, I wasn't too sure what the level was going to be like. And I think for the most part, the league has been quite competitive for us, which is great. I mean, for us, we came up with some, we follow our club values, but we talked about what that means for our player group and for us to go through our values of grit, grace, and togetherness. And I think I'm very proud of this group. I think, we've had some great leaders come in and help guide the team, and someone like Anna to get us the 1 goal against St. Albert when we traveled a couple hours, scored late in the game, and then sat in an hour rain delay for 2 minutes left in the game. Like, I think we've definitely had some games where I'm showing up and I know I have 13 players because a lot of them have graduated and I don't have a feeder team. Like, I think we've gone through some tough moments as a group, but I think even our youngest player, like our 2011s that step on the field all the way to our 2008s, like they're all ready to compete every single game. And I think a game like last night where Rangers goes up 1-0 and we're feeling frantic because we feel the pressure of needing these 3 points and knowing that if we get this win and maybe one more, that we can close out, the league on top. I think for them, like they're so driven to be such a young team and come out with a successful season with it being like our first year in League One. I think they've handled the pressures of that, and they show up every day for training, ready to compete, just to make sure that we can be the best on the field. Like, I don't think I could have asked for a better season, even if we necessarily don't end up on top. I think that this group has put in every bit of work that they could have. So I don't think I could have asked for a better season, to be honest.
You have had some success stories already talking about the youth permit players, but also players that have gone on to university. Are there any specific success stories that you would want to mention and sort of like mention to our audience and say, like, look, these are some players that being part of this program has really helped elevate their game?
I think there are definitely a couple that come to mind. Like, I love youth development and developing young players. And I think for me, it's been a big passion. I mean, I did a lot of that in Ontario as well and have had a few players go off and are now playing for our youth national teams. But I would say, Annalise Sequoia from last night scores a hat trick as a 2010, has been a player who has always been a midfielder, started as a 10, progressively moved to the 8 and plays as a big role in the 6 for us as a 2010. I think is a pretty crucial role in a team. Down the spine of the team as a 2010, I think is crazy. But I also think for her, she's someone who consistently supports our first team and is in the training environments. And I know that's quite a young player to have in there, but I also think that her technical ability and tactical understanding is someone that we can have in the environment, and she maintains the level. And she also just got called to our U16 national team and went to Poland and played a couple games there and played some big minutes there. And I think is really growing into herself as a player. So I would say she would be one. Yeah, I feel like there's so many. We've had Ellie McIntosh, she's a development player for us as a 2011, also got called to that U16 national team camp and scored the only goal for them while they were away. So they had one tie and one win, which was fantastic. Again, I feel like I could keep going and keep going. But I think a player who has been flying under the radar is Lennon McGuire for me. I think that she's a player who is relentless and fearless on the field. And we are working on like fine tuning and little refinements as a fullback. But I think for me as a 2009 who has been a fantastic addition. And I just think about when I first moved here in January and I went and watched a couple games and she was playing for Rangers. And I went to watch another team and I remember seeing this player on the field being like, I need her in my environment. And it was just like a fluke. I was not even there to watch her. And I remember when I first sent the emails out and I emailed her and I never heard back. And I was quite disappointed because I remember just thinking about how badly I wanted this player in my environment. And Rangers, I followed up with them and they put us in contact. And I think she's come in and been a fantastic player for us. And she's actually committed to go to University of Calgary and play under Diogo there. And I think that's going to be a fantastic move for her. But I think there's just so many players I can sit here and list them one by one and why I'd be so proud, like Sienna being in net as a 2010, Maya Emberley being a fullback and a winger for us, OJ being, a center back who I've kind of converted into a 9 and scoring a brace last night. Like, I think there, again, so many players I think I can go into detail and just praise them and be so proud of them. But I think that there are some of them who have stepped up and supported our first team. And some we've really, really seen grow in our youth environment. So,
in addition to doing all of the stuff with the academy and the youth program, you have been with the senior side as an assistant coach. How has that been? How has it been to juggle all of these, wear all these different hats and have all these different responsibilities? How have you been able to manage all that?
I'm working pretty big days right now. So I'm in, I would say, our office, which is Maxwell Soccer Center. So I'm in there typically at 7:30 to start our staff meetings with the first team. So we'll have meetings with the staff, then meetings with the players, and sometimes individual meetings with our units. And then we have practice. And then I'm typically having lunch and then kind of jumping into either another meeting with the tech staff or into practice with the academy. And then I'm typically getting home around 6:30 in the evening and then kind of prepping the next day. So my days probably end around 10 p.m. and are starting around 6 a.m. I do love what I do. So sometimes like when I'm on the field, I'm not really feeling like, well, I'm at work. Like, so I think overall, like it is a lot to juggle. I think some things I have a few people who support, and they help me not let things fall through the cracks as easily. So they kind of keep me accountable, which is great. I think someone like Ali Hess, who does help me on a regular basis, like she was so excited to cut video for us to be able to present to players today from our game last night. I had someone like Molly Race. I know she's obviously stepped away from our first team, but she's been a crucial role for us in our academy and looking at our goalkeeper development. She's also stepped away from us, but she was fantastic and was a big role model and fantastic goalkeeper coach for our academy. If there's ever anything I need, I know our first team are able to, that staff is so supportive. And I think people within our environment really recognize all of the effort that everyone puts in to make it happen and to make it work. My husband gives a couple check-ins here and there of, are you taking care of yourself and our dog? I genuinely love what I do.
Now let's talk about the men's table. And with 2 matches left, it's a bit tighter than in the women's division, but BTB could claim the title this weekend, although it's not as simple as with Wild U23, because Wild U23, they just have to win and it's over. Other things have to happen here too.
Yeah, and this is an interesting program of matches in that the top 3 teams in the men's division are all playing teams that are further down the table. So BTB is taking on Callies at Weber, which I think, not to disrespect Callies, but I think BTB is going to be the heavy favorites in that one. And then Foothills will be taking on St. Albert Impact. However, they do have to travel north for that one. That game is going to be in St. Albert. And then Blizzard, the team in second, just 1 point back of BTB, they're facing Villains at Edge School. So that's another game where I think, Blizzard are going to be heavily favorited. So this is a game where I could realistically see all 3 of the top 3 teams claiming maximum points. And I think we've talked before that the last game of the season will be Blizzard versus Foothills. So that's set up to potentially be a really intriguing battle, or it could be a lot less impactful depending on how these Friday night matches go.
So we've already talked about the 3 doubleheaders, Callies, BTB, St. Albert Foothills, and then Blizzard Villains. We, of course, talked about Wild U23. They're playing Rangers on Friday night at the Maxwell Center. Well, I guess it's Friday afternoon, 3:30. And that's going to be the match where they could clinch it all.
And Jason, as we know, Cavalry 2 often play the same day and location as Wild U23. However, that's not the case this weekend, as they'll actually be back out in Kamloops to take on Kamloops United and a BC Premier League select team.
Yeah, it's this Kamloops International Cup. This is the 3rd year or 4th year of this kind of interesting project that Kamloops has taken on, where they bring a bunch of teams in. Usually they bring in teams from Europe. And I know in previous years, Cavalry has played Fulham, I think it was, their youth team. And I feel there's another one. But this year, for whatever reasons, they did not bring in a European team on the men's side. They're bringing in Nottingham Forest youth team. They don't get that match against like a big English club's youth team, but still, I guess a good opportunity to play some different opposition. And
yeah, it seems like it's become an annual tradition for the reserves.
Hey guys, Scott Kennedy here, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
There have been a whole bunch of signings. It's July, right? It's transfer window time everywhere. And there have been a whole bunch of signings of players, former Wild players, former Cavalry players. I could put together a list, but I think we just wanted to at least talk today about one player that we've had on as a guest, and he's a Calgarian, and this week he found a new club.
Yeah, that's Scott Kennedy. The defender has signed with SGV Heilbronn Freiberg in the 4th tier of German football. Jason, you and I were texting back and forth when you told me this news. He was most recently playing with, I believe they were called KAS Eupen in Belgium's 2nd division. And, I don't know much about Belgian football, but when I heard that Scott Kennedy was going to be moving to the 4th division, it did raise my eyebrow a little bit. It seems like a drop from the level that he's played at in the past, right? He used to be in the Zweite Bundesliga, the second division in Germany. But wishing him the best, and hopefully he can put together some really strong performances and revive his career a little bit.
Well, we've talked before. What would you say is an equivalent level to the CPL in some European leagues? And it seems like the fourth level in Germany is probably somewhat comparable to CPL, but I would think the money's probably better in Germany overall. And he's had a long career there already. So I guess from that point of view, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, he's played most of his career in Germany, right? And he actually started his career, I think, very low down the ladder and worked his way all the way up to the Dritte Liga and the Zweite Liga. Yeah, no, fourth division I've been to a game in fourth division German football. The city where I lived briefly when I was in Germany, their local club played in the fourth division. And they get to play, the likes of Bayern Munich reserves, FC Nuremberg reserves. So even though it is a regional league and probably considered semi-pro, in many cases, I think, there are opportunities to be scouted by clubs that are in the Bundesliga. And, some of these fourth division clubs still, they're maybe not in a big city, but they're the main team in town, right? So you still get really good crowds. And I think I saw that with former Cavalry player Nicholas Veiling, who's also playing in the fourth division, but put out a highlight reel on social media a while back. And I was really impressed by, some of these crowds that he was playing in front of, probably, 5 to 10,000. Something.
It's an understandable move. And I guess too, he's still just 29 years old. For a central defender, that's still a position where, you still have some pretty good years ahead of you.
Yeah, like obviously, I don't think he's on the radar of Jesse Marsch, even though he used to play pretty regularly for the national team. There's probably a few defenders ahead of him in the pecking order, but wishing Scott all the best. He's a former Chinook guy just like me. We had the same coach, so I'm hoping to see him do great things with his new club.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the YYC Soccer Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, so new episodes are waiting for you as soon as they're released. Visit yycsoccer.com for our complete archive and links to purchase Scott's book, Here Come the Cavalry. It's all about the history of professional soccer in Calgary. We'd love your feedback. Leave us a question on our website. Connect with us on social media such as Blue Sky or Instagram or X, where our username is yycsoccer403. If you have a moment, leave us a review. It really helps other soccer fans discover the show. We'll be back soon with more stories from Calgary's soccer community. Until next time, keep supporting local soccer, and we'll see you at the match.